Thank you all. Thank you for coming. I already welcomed a few of you, but thank you for those of you who have come in. We are a small group, but we are so glad that you're here tonight, and thank you, Kim, for filming, so that we can have an opportunity to have some discussion about topics that are really important to us. And we thought we would start just by introducing ourselves. So, hello. I know most of you in this room, but for the sake of filming, I'm Hannegan Roseberry, and my position is entitled the Courage Coordinator at school. And I feel really lucky that that's my title, because that plays out in a lot of arenas at school, but this is one of the ones that's most dear to my heart. These folks who are joining me tonight, I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment, are part of the team-led group called ASSIST at our school. And ASSIST stands for Against Silence, Social Insecurity, and Social Tyranny. And that original acronym was formed years ago here at the school, the year before I even got here. And so all of us here today are getting to continue a legacy that started before our time here in the high school. And it was started by a group of teens in 2010 following, unfortunately, a tragedy in our school community. We lost one of our learners to suicide, Ryan Plam, and the group was formed by a group of his friends who were left behind trying to sort through the pieces and trying to honor him and trying to build a community based on dialogue and compassion and mutual support. And these guys, every week we get together, and there are a handful of other learners involved with the planning as well, that we brainstorm and we discuss, and I'm so amazed by all of their courage every week in talking about hard things and planning for their peers opportunities to connect, to learn, to spread awareness, and to support one another. And it's not an easy thing to do in the adult world, much less in the teen world. And so I'm amazed every week by all of you. And so I'll stop rambling now. I want to just do some quick introductions. Maybe what studio you're in, maybe what level of school. That might be helpful. You want to go first?
I'm Zoe, and I'm in Sequoia, and I am a junior.
My name is Haley, and I'm an 11th grader in Cypress.
Hi, I'm Annalise. I am a 10th grader in Sycamore. I'm Oliver. I'm also a 10th grader in Sycamore. You guys can just call me Kirby, and I'm a senior in Oak.
Thank you. We'll get started. We do have some slides prepared just to introduce some basic context for the discussion, and then we look forward to having some dialogue as opposed to just us up here
Also,
sharing.
can we just share a little we have some people who couldn't be here, so it's going to be a little choppy in a few areas because we had to adjust to that.
Improvisation, like we have.
That's me, okay.
We're standing up. We're standing up. Okay.
Are we not?
We are now.
So again, adjusting, not my slide, but so in 2016, there were 904 suicides in Indiana, which may not seem like a lot, but Indiana, is a small state, so, when you think about that in perspective, that's really a lot. And the 10 to 14 age range has the highest rate of suicide, which is, that's an incredibly just eye-boggling statistic to think that, these young people are being affected by this so early in life, and it actually ends up being the highest rate of suicide because they don't have any information, which is, kind of what we're talking about today. The average gap of 10 years between a child having a mental health challenge and the child receiving support with these challenges. So as I was saying, 10 to 14 age range, highest rate of suicide. It's because these people don't have any awareness to what's going on in their lives, and as we're going to discuss in more detail, they're scared to go to their parents or other family members with these life-changing events. And so for people who don't end up committing suicide, there's usually an average gap of 10 years before they even think about receiving treatment. So.
And by then, we're often in crisis mode, is the reality. And we see that at school in our own population, that by the time you're hearing about it, there have maybe been things coming down the pipeline, which is something we're actively working towards. And as a staff as well this year, trying to better understand how crisis situations start so that we can try to get upstream and intervene and be proactive in that instead of trying to, after the fact, handle when someone is already at that very heightened level. That's mine. Oh, thank you, Zoe. So, in our society, we know what to do when there are physical health issues. We break a limb, we know, we go to the doctor and we get that addressed. If someone has a really high fever and cold symptoms, we know what to do. We go to the doctor. You can go to a dinner party and say, wow, I broke my arm, or my child broke my arm, and you're typically not a social pariah if you say that out loud. However, you don't often get that same just kind of nonchalant, okay, if you say, well, my child is having consistent rage attacks and panic attacks daily, and we are really trying to work through a mental health crisis. Throw that out at a cocktail party, and you don't tend to get the same response. And even if the response isn't outright judgment, or which I've received all of those as an individual, because I do talk very openly about challenges, because I feel like that's an important part of breaking down that stigma. But oftentimes people just don't know how to talk about it, and they don't know what to say, or it's awkward or uncomfortable, because these are hard things to talk about. But the reality is, everyone in life deals with mental health challenges. That's just part of being a human. And that at any given moment, at any age in our lives, we're all somewhere along this spectrum between feeling really well and feeling really unwell and dealing with illness. And that goes with our mental capacity as much as it goes with our physical capacities. And so mental health, thinking of it as essential health, is the first step in helping people to get past that stigma piece that keeps us from having these hard conversations. So mental health challenges, they're going to affect all of us at some point in life. May not be to the point of actually experiencing illness, but odds are someone in your life is going to. And so knowing that it's a equal opportunity challenge, meaning it doesn't affect only certain groups or certain ages or certain socioeconomic statuses, it can affect anyone at any time. And the more awareness and support in society, the healthier we can all be as we support each other. We have a short video here that I wanted to share. There are a lot of great, beautiful videos and resources on the YouTube, but this was a short one that kind of went along with our title, which I found this after the fact, which is kind of fun because we had already called the evening, It's Okay to Not Be Okay. So I'm going to share this. Glenn helped me to get the sound to work, so we'll see if it's still working.
If my brain was a house, anxiety would be the morning alarm. Time is in fire alarms, all going off at once, and no matter what you do, it's impossible to turn them off.
I was constantly bullied from a young age for being small and skinny. It all started there.
It began when I was 12, when my mother died.
More and more, I was closing off the world around me, numbing myself to cope as I fell deeper into these episodes of intense panic.
I was taking substances that I shouldn't have been taking. My thoughts were dark and scary.
As a form of self-punishment, I starved myself. I would go days without eating.
I would sometimes wallow in bed for days on end. My family never really understood why.
I never mention what's going on inside my head to employees. I can imagine how they react.
People around me just assume that I'm thin for the sake of vanity.
But I found something in myself, something that neither the world nor my mind can take away. My art.
I reach down deep and find strength inside. I surprise myself how strong I can be. Day by day.
I have found a greater purpose. Precious chapters of my life continue to unfold, which I never thought possible.
Sometimes it's simply just okay to not be okay.
We are the authors of our own destinies.
What others think of us doesn't matter.
We can take back that part of ourselves and own it once again.
I really love that idea of it's okay to not be okay. And that might sound like a counterproductive thing to say when you're talking about mental health and mental health challenges. But the idea of first removing that judgment piece can be really powerful for someone who is in a crisis mode where it's escalated to the point where they've got a lot of negative self-talk going on that's beyond the control oftentimes, and so there's a judgment that can come along with that, and so helping someone to let themselves off the hook so that they can start that healing process and knowing that this is just one part of their life and not their entire destiny can be really empowering. Okay, here we have okay.
So considering a stigma, the first thing you want to consider is what is a stigma? Now, a stigma is defined as a mark of disgrace that's ascribed to a person, circumstance, or quality. And so when people are seeking help for their mental health issues, this is one of the things that prevents them from speaking out. It prevents them from seeking help. It prevents them from talking to their friends or family or other loved ones about it. So I want to ask you, what do you think about mental health counselors who are finding help?
Or what have you heard people say about it if you were trying to think of examples of stigma?
I think it's a good thing. The challenge is to find and match the right counselor or professional with the individual and the phenomena of what's going on with that moment. That's the challenge.
Is finding the right fit
Yes.
in counseling services.
And it should not be a stigma seeking out the counselor or professional that some people think it is.
Right.
It shouldn't be.
I hear from families or teens, it didn't work, we tried that, and hard to get them to try again or to find the right fit. That seems to be a challenge.
Cost.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to pay for mental health.
Yeah.
Right.
Period.
So I think you'll just get over it, or
Yeah, it's not looked at as being a disease process.
Right.
In the sense of it being a neurologic disorder. And unlike cancer, where you can say just bootstrap yourself up, just get over your cancer.
Right.
People will say just get over your whatever it is that you.
Yeah. Try harder, do
Yeah.
yoga, have tea. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And people may not think of those types of statements as stigma. People are ill-meaning when they say, "Oh, all teens feel that way. You'll get over it." We may not think of that as stigma, but it is a subtle form of stigma, and it presents a barrier to getting help, oftentimes.
So what a lot of people, what I expected someone to say was something that we associate with stigma. So I'm really glad that no one met my expectations. So when we're considering stigmas around mental health, usually what people say is going on, what Hannegan said was that people are faking it. That people say that they have a mental disorder, but really they're just seeking attention for it. And that's a stigma. It's describing a negative connotation to people who have mental illness and who actually seek help for it. People also think, wow, you must be some sort of failure for having a mental health problem. Or like was mentioned, you're not actually sick.
You're so overdramatic.
So we treat physical injuries more aggressively than we treat mental injuries. And then we have stigmas around counselors and therapists. So my mom is a psychologist, and one of the things that people say when they think about her profession is that, oh, you just must talk to crazy people all the time. And so people ascribe this notion that if you go to a counselor or a therapist, you're like the worst of the worst, and you're just crazy. Just not a nice word to say, but or they think that something is seriously wrong with you. And then we have stigmas about finding help, which is harkening back to what I said earlier, is this is what keeps people from seeking help. It's what keeps them from talking to teachers when they're feeling depressed or suicidal or anxious, is this stigma about finding help, because people think that when they seek out help that they're weak, or they can't handle things themselves. And we see this desire to take care of yourself and think that you can fix your own problems, but for a lot of people that's just not possible. So the stigma is preventing people from seeking the treatment that they need. And, lastly, stigma is about talking to your children about mental illness. Does anybody want to name some of those?
It's what?
Stigma is about talking to your children about mental illness.
Would that be kind of along the lines of all teenagers feel like that, or oh, that you're just being dramatic? So dismissive type, is that what you mean by that?
You'll grow up and you'll get over it. When you're 20, you won't feel depressed.
Yeah, I love the magic number. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
It's 25. I remember on my 20th birthday when all of a sudden I didn't feel depressed anymore.
It all worked out.
It was a lovely day. I remember yesterday.
Right.
Me, with my 19th birthday, I couldn't talk to people and I was crying all the time, and then midnight, 20th birthday.
It all worked out. Yep. And we don't realize saying things like that or dismissing it and are a form of stigma, but it happens all the time. Or kids will say, oh, I don't want, I'll hear kids and teens sometimes say things like, I'm not one of those people. Oh, I'm not the kind of, or parents will say, they're not crazy, they're not that kind of person, as if it's a certain kind of person that goes to counselors or mental health professionals. We're really, anyone and all of us can benefit from mental health checkups, just like we can physical health checkups.
And we also see a lot of comparing negativity, like teenagers will say, well, I never tried to kill myself, so I don't need to get help, because I know that people who try to kill themselves need to get help. But if I'm just depressed, that doesn't, like, I don't have it as worth it with other people, so I don't need to seek help. And that is all derived from your stigmas. Thank you.
So this is diving further into that idea of family conversations about mental health. I've got notes.
We're prepared.
Yep, prepared.
So the first thing is how to talk to your kid about mental illness. And don't make it seem like it will never happen to them. Don't be like, oh, there are those people with depression, but we're not one of them. And then also, don't make them, also, I have heard a lot of people say things like there's no reason that you should have these problems, like if you have a perfect life sort of situation. That's something that happens to a lot of people, our adults saying, oh, there's no reason you should be depressed because we give you these things, but that's not necessarily how it is. And then the other thing that I have for this one is don't make mental illness seem scary or inhuman. Like, oh, there are those scary people with schizophrenia. We don't talk to those people. So why is stigma affecting your child? If you, as a parent, have stigma to mental illnesses, then you can easily influence your child to also have those stigmas. So maybe for people who don't have mental illnesses and then they grow up in a household that has those things and they pass that on, your stigma can make your kids feel bad about their mental illness. So whether you know that they have problems or not, you saying certain things can make them feel like they're doing something wrong, even if it's something they can't control. And you can make your child not trust you to talk about their problems. So if you say certain things, then your child is going to not want to open up to you because they know that you're not going to be on board or interested in helping them. And then things that you need to know if your child tells you that they think they have mental illness, or if you're talking to a child about it, is to know mental illness is not a bad thing or something to be ashamed of if your child does have it. It's not something embarrassing or something that no one needs to know about. And then, like, quite a few people have mental illness, so it's nothing out of the ordinary, really. And then, don't dismiss your child if they are saying that they think they have a mental illness, because pretty sure they know themselves pretty well, and if they are having these problems, don't say, oh, you're just a teen, or oh, you couldn't possibly have this, or I've tried to help you and it just doesn't work, or things like that. Because then you're just telling your kid that their problems aren't as important.
Questions or comments?
Oh yeah, questions.
I have a question. What advice would you give a teen that that has a parent maybe that is dismissive or says, I think she's fine. There's nothing wrong with her. She's just being dramatic, and what advice would you give that teen to try to get some better support?
Talk to a teacher like Hannegan. Hannegan's always a good resource because Hannegan will listen to you.
Yeah.
I have actually, because Barbara and I talk about these things all the time, but we have, we deal with that situation a lot, which you said that's pretty common. And
Maybe
so,
bring the parent in and have the
Right.
conversation
Yeah.
with them. Yeah.
so that's looked a lot of different ways sometimes, we try to let the child or teen take the lead on that, how do you want that to look? And sometimes they'll say, I want my parent to come in and for you to sit with me, or can you email the parent on my behalf, communicating. And sometimes, best case scenario, that's the catalyst then, is just to get a different perspective on it, hearing it from a different perspective. It's not that adults have some magical understanding that that child or teen doesn't have, but sometimes that additional layer of communication can be the catalyst to get that next level of support.
What about involving a pediatrician
That's a great question.
as a way of establishing sort of authority and diagnostic criteria that says?
Right. And if we get the opportunity to meet with the parent in person, or whether it's over email and such, when they ask questions and they're ready now to get some suggestions on where do we go next, we have a resource here that we're going to share here at the end that we did print out that has, you are. You have to stand there, you're not done. But we keep this up to date with local counseling and therapy services on both sides of the river. And these are mental health resources, but we often say you can start those conversations with your pediatrician, and pediatricians can make recommendations as well. And so it varies depending on the family, but we recommend it all of the above. We try to just give as much information as possible so that families can feel empowered to seek out the help that makes sense for their family and their circumstance.
Were you also suggesting just use the pediatrician to be the one that tells the family, why don't you talk, if you don't believe your child, why don't you just talk to your pediatrician about?
Or if there's really a situation between the child and the parent, is to tell the child, have you told your pediatrician? And then use that as a way to
Sure.
if they didn't feel comfortable with the teacher, or the teacher didn't feel whatever, but using that as a conduit as well.
I appreciate that suggestion.
Yeah,
Because
and
the
it's a
pediatrician-
respected position,
Right.
in our culture, right? Yeah.
And they sometimes get that private dialogue time with the pediatrician. So thank you. That's a great suggestion. Is this Phoebe? This might have been Phoebe. And Phoebe was unfortunately pulled into work tonight. I'll just kind of run through this. We had a LifeSpring counselor come in and do a presentation for us, but these are things we've read about and talked about a lot over the last handful of years as we've all worked on these topics together. But, as we said, mental health versus mental illness, that it's a spectrum, that we're all somewhere along that spectrum at any given time. And so how do we know, and this is a conversation we have a lot with teens, is how do we know when is this just regular, appropriate stress response? It's not realistic that none of us are ever going to have anxiety or stress. That's not the goal. That's part of life. But it's understanding when is it tipping over into something where we might need to look at getting an extra level of support. And so the barometer I've always used, and the lady from Life Spring who came in, she reiterated this, and she had a couple of different levels to it. But the basic barometer that I like to use is your mental health, is the challenge you're dealing with, interfering with your daily life? Is it interfering with your ability to interact and, engage in the things you enjoy and the people around you? Is it getting in your way of doing those things? And if the answer is yes, then I always recommend we go to that next step then and let a mental health professional get involved to give some extra support as well. So having stress that is appropriate, oh, I have a test that's tomorrow and it's really hard, or oh, I've got a presentation and I don't feel prepared. Those are appropriate stressors. And helping kids to navigate appropriate stressors is our first step that we try to work on together as we plan activities and such. But also knowing when to how to recognize when it is at that next level. It's interfering with sleep, eating, our daily activities, our ability to engage and have healthy friendships and other relationships. I am trying to remember what she meant by as teens, what do we think are typical? I think maybe those regular stressors versus atypical stressors. How to help your teens with normal stress versus mental illness. And again, I feel like we've already kind of said some of these things, listening to them, and some of these upcoming slides are more about that listening part and figuring out what to do next. But if your teen does bring a problem to you or a challenge to you, putting those listening ears on and hearing them without judgment so that you can then make a next plan, and whether that's a plan with school. Ideally, we'd like to be involved because we're all a partnership here together with our families. And then when needed, going to the mental health professional community as well. Okay, yeah, so everybody?
Okay.
So the conversation's happening, now what?
Okay, healthy communication, do's and don'ts. You can read them, but obviously don't freak out. So I have a few situations. Can anyone, before I list them, can anyone think of any situations where a teen might be having mental health issues, or even just, issues in general, it has to do with just health, to where you might jump to conclusions or start making judgments or start
Parents
giving
never do
advice
that. Yes, I do.
immediately into the conversation before they even explain how their situation is.
Involved in the relationships in the various stages. The dreaded kiss, the dreaded whatever.
Yep.
Anything else?
Are you going to give examples?
Yeah.
I don't want to steer your thunder.
So, since we are talking, there are a lot of things that a teen can come to you about that, would make you immediately jump to conclusions, saying they're pregnant or something like that. But also, mental health-wise, a common thing that you will immediately jump to conclusions about would be I'm depressed or I'm anxious. An immediate response to someone saying that they think they have an actual panic disorder or anxiety disorder would be, oh, well, all teenagers get anxiety. They give you a lot of schoolwork. We had the same amount of schoolwork when we were in high school. But, what you need to do is obviously don't freak out. If they come to you and they are willing to tell you that they're suicidal or depressed and they're scared that they need help because they're on the verge, that's a really powerful thing that they're coming to you. It's stressful for the teen, and you have to see it from their point of view, that coming to a parent and telling them that they're this vulnerable stage right now is incredibly, and obviously, parents, they love their children, so you need to try not to freak out, stay calm, same thing. No judgment, just listen. So if they're talking about having anxiety, they might have an actual anxiety disorder, and it may be because of school stress and stuff, but they can still have an actual anxiety disorder and have school stress. So no judgment. They need to know you're there for them. We touched a lot on this stuff in the last PIP meeting that assisted last year, and you can look at it on Facebook, so I'm just going to throw that in there. don't get angry, don't dismiss their feelings, and don't offer advice yet, just listen, because, you know, they may have more to say than you're ready to hear, and we just need to pay attention to what they're really trying to say, and I think in a lot of instances, they just want to know you're there for them, and we're going to touch on therapy in a little bit, and, you know, it may be better to get therapy than to offer your parental advice at all points, so.
All right, there's parents, any parents in the room? Do it. And if you like to offer advice when, like every time one of my kids brings me, so this really, I put this on, it's me, I mean me. Because as parents, we care, we want to fix it, and we have all this brilliant life experience, you know, being several decades older, and so it's, oh, here's what you need to do, or oh, if you, it's having to hold that and just practice that listening part, and school gives a lot of practice with that as we all help each other and listen to each other on things, but I feel like it's harder to do at home, especially when it's your people in your home, and so really trying to just hear and not jump into the let's fix it mode. I need to fix this for you. I know how to fix this. Instead, just hearing and trying to let them take the lead as much as possible, and to feel empowered in this frightening, vulnerable moment.
I like to point out to my mom a lot when she tries to offer me advice on teen situations. I'm like, you know, you did the same thing when you were a teen.
Never.
And she's still alive, so.
So that's what we're going with.
Yeah, that's what we're going with.
And there is on the website an article. I did quite a bit of research on communication, do's and don'ts and such, and some of this is from that, but it's on the website. If you look at our blog area of our website, this was from a month or so ago, and it goes into some more depth about different age groups and different communication strategies. So when and how to.
Okay, so I actually didn't see the slide before I made my list of things, so I'll just, is that okay if I read what I have, and I'll see what I already touched on? So, talk to your kid and ask questions and answer their questions. So if they're talking to you, and we've already touched on what you should do or what suggestions on what you should do when your kid talks to you, but if your kid has questions about mental health, just like you would answer their questions if they came to you with questions about relationships, you should answer their questions about it, even if they're little or even if they're a lot older like us. And then if you have questions, then you should either ask them if you're comfortable with it or ask somebody who knows. Like Hannegan's a really good resource because she knows all about that kind of stuff. Also, if you have a therapist or your kid has a therapist, that's a good thing. And then believe your kid, don't always assume that they're lying or wanting attention. And I'll touch on that a little later. And then if they're making things up for attention, they actually are, which very rarely happens in my experience. There's probably something else wrong than what they're making up. So if they're making up things and they're just wanting attention from you, then there's something else wrong in their lives. So you should ask about that more than saying, oh, you're making it up or anything like that. So don't always assume. And if you know for a fact that that's happening, then there's always something else going on. If you have the funds, a good research therapist will always help, most likely. So if you find a perfect fit for a therapist and you have, you have the funds to use a therapist, then that is always good. And then find the right therapist. If your kid doesn't like them, don't blame them and don't make them feel guilty about it. So if your kid comes to you and says, hey, my therapist really isn't doing their job, we're not a good fit, and I'm not looking forward to going to my therapist, then it's not your kid's fault. And it's not necessarily the therapist's fault, you just need to find the right fit. If you don't have enough funds to go to a therapist, there's always wonderful supporters in our school, and they specialize on how to deal with things. So Barbara's always a good resource, so is Hannegan, and then also most of the advisors will definitely help with that. And then if your kid won't open up to you, because that's also a thing too, where you ask your kids some things and they won't tell you, or they don't have they can't or they won't. It's always good to talk to their friends if their friends are worried about them. So if you, not trying to pry into their private life, because friends are always different than family when it comes to things like that, but if you do have the chance to talk to their friends and they're willing to open up, that's always a good resource. And then talking to their advisor, because advisors know more things than friends sometimes, because you tell your advisor some things. So if you are really worried, then I would suggest talking to the friends or the advisors. But most of all, I wouldn't just let them know that you're always open and welcome to talk to them no matter what it is concerning mental health, also just in general. And then don't get upset, like you said, just don't get upset about whatever they're going to say surrounding mental health. And then there's also hotlines for everyone that are usually free. You can text or call them, so if your kid needs to talk to someone besides you or the people at the school, we have numbers, but I'll say them really quick. The one for texting, if you don't feel, or your kid doesn't feel comfortable with calling, is 741-741. And that's a texting, and you text connect. And then for calling, there's a big, longer thing. And there's also different hotlines for different things. So like there's an after abortion hotline, and there's a depression one, and there's sexual assault and all that stuff. So it depends on what your situation is. That's all I have. And then, so if your kid asks for help, like I said, don't automatically assume that it's just for attention. And you should ask them a question like, what do you think you need help with? Personally, if I was trying to find a therapist and I had this specific problem that I really wanted to talk about, then I would research that on the internet if I was looking for a therapist on the internet. And then, so I think I've got any questions or comments or anything like that.
And again, we'll pass out, we have a list of community resources, but again, the pediatrician is often a great starting point as well.
Annalise, what advice would you give to parents when they find that their child or teen is self-harming or cutting